Hello, Paul here, reporting from the greenhouse. Just going to make a quick video about feeding plants. Do you feed your plants? If not, you may want to think about this. Plants in pots need feed. So if you have ornamental plants or any kind of edible produce or anything, but especially when they're in pots, they need feed. Plants in the ground that are in a healthy ground that's full of all sorts of bacteria and bugs and all sorts of things, they don't need feeding because they're in a healthy environment, and it's actually the excretions of all the bacteria and all the stuff going under there, dead fungi, dead everything, and all the mycelium and all of these things that the plants can absorb nutrients from. So remember, we're not in that situation, we're not actually feeding the plants, we're feeding the soil. So I suppose when you think about that, that's the reason why you don't want to be using non-organic feeds and fertilizers, because you're not feeding the soil with them, you're actually killing it. So using organic methods is best. So here I have some seaweed dust. You can buy seaweed in liquid form or in a kind of a dust like this, and you can probably get pellets too, or you could take it normally. There's lots of different ways. I have some of this, and I throw this on a lot of things. I throw it around the tops of plants, and it washes down handy into the soil. Here's a kind of a manure kind of a mix, and that's the reason why I'm wearing gloves, because it stinks a bit. So not really for indoor growing. Don't use this because it'll stink out your microgreen room or whatever. So that's just a ground kind of some kind of a ground manure, dried manure, I don't know which way you pronounce that. Here's more. These are chicken manure pellets, so they're in pellets. Now, if you're feeding a plant that is already potted and in this pot, and you can put this on the top, but if you're getting your soil ready or you're amending your soil, then you can work all these things through your soil before you go potting. But everything here is potted by me, so I'm just putting it on the top, kind of a lazy way to do it. Here's a lovely acer who's just leafing out, looking great. Things kind of grow a bit differently in the greenhouse to be perfect, but yeah. So what I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to mix the pellets in with the seaweed dust here. So I'm just going to throw them in there. There's a kind of a dust that comes off it. I suppose it's manure dust. It stinks. And I'm going to throw in some of this stuff. Right, so you've got seaweed in there, and you've got a couple of different kinds of granular feeds, and that's just mixed like that. Now, oh my god, I'm breathing in this manure. So now I'm just going to I've got a lot of plants to do here, but I'm just going to walk around and I'm just going to put a little sprinkle on top of every pot, just like that. And it'll probably take weeks for that to be actually washed down properly, but slowly, every time the plant is watered, that'll wet and it'll start to break down and it'll start to make its way through there, and those nutrients then will be available for the plant. Remember, the thing to remember is plants in pots that need nutrients more than plants in healthy ground. Obviously, because they're in a small pot and they can deplete the pot of nutrients, or watering might even deplete this small little section of kind of whatever's in it, whatever your medium is. It can be very quickly leached of its nutrients. So that's why you need to be aware of plants in pots that need feeding. But remember this, they don't need feeding if they're not growing. If they're dormant, then they're not really going to, they're just in a dormant state, they're not growing, they're not soaking up nutrients, they're not really doing a whole pile. So there's no point in feeding, and there's not much point in watering too much if a plant is dormant. Now, we're in March now, coming up to mid-March, and a few plants are starting to show signs that they're starting to wake up and grow a bit. It's not a bad time now, because we know they're going to be wanting to start soaking up nutrients and stuff. They're going to want to eat. So now isn't a bad time to start adding nutrients to your plants. If your plants are indoors and they're growing all the time, then you'd want to be feeding fairly regularly. Indoors, I use the seaweed kind of feed. As I say, using manure in your house is too smelly. So yeah, remember, plants in pots need regular feeding when they're actively growing. So just keep that in mind as we're coming out of the winter now into the spring, although by the calendar we're probably in spring, but it's I don't know, it's still a bit dangerous to be putting any plants outside. I'm not doing it yet. In a couple of weeks now I'll start putting them outside. But you can start, if you have them indoors or wherever you have them, even if they're outdoors, if they're showing signs of coming to life, then think about getting some feed into them. You can also use liquid feeds and things like that. But remember, avoid non-organic feeds, fertilizers, because you're just contaminating your greenhouse, your pots, and your environment. So yeah, please like, share and subscribe to my videos, because it's kind of supporting the channel. Yeah, thanks.